Hi, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome if you're currently here in the live chat. Yes, we're continuing on analysing and questioning the latest developments and breaking news in the Dylan Rounds case. If you haven't already, make sure to check out last night's video as we looked deep into all the news articles as well as the official court documents of Brenner's charges, as well as a press release. There'll be a link down below in the pinned comment section, okay? So make sure to check that out after watching this. Today, we're going to be, transitioning on analysing further, as well as looking at the latest Candice Cooley response. There was a video, but instead we're going to look at the transcript of it, the text, so you can actually read it word for word, okay? And see what Candice Cooley has had to say most recent. I think this was like hours ago it was done, so it's very recent, and that's why we're going to take a look at it today. As for the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page, there isn't really anything new there at the moment, just people giving their thoughts and opinions. But if I remember to add it in later on in this video, the Find Dylan Rounds admin member actually commented on one of my previous videos, and they actually had a request. So we'll look into that later and I'll share it with you and try and make sense of it, okay? As well, we can check out the comments from the previous video. If there's any important questions, any key observations made which need to be, looked at, answered if possible, we'll do that first of all to allow people to join in, come into this video, this live premiere, so we're all here at once, okay? And, if there's time, also taking a look at the map just to understand and see if we can map it out visually how things went with this whole burial and then the desecration, etc., etc. Just to understand it, because we've been quite heavy with the text recently. Just try and ease it off slightly, because sometimes it can be quite hard to understand all in one go. But at least that previous video is a bulk one. And you know what, I'll acknowledge another thing. That last video I did, which talked about a lot, which was relevant, and a lot of important points, a lot of different articles, a lot of in-depth information, and not too much misinformation. And the video was only 1 hour, 20 minutes long. That is effective, efficient, and somewhat straight to the point, which may not always be the case, but it was last night. So that's definitely a key thing. Also, as we do go along in this video, once again, feel free to share your thoughts, opinions, and reactions in the live chat. That's why the box is there. And just feel free to talk about other things in between. As for behaviour, for most part of it, people on good behaviour last night, but that is partially because there was other streams going on elsewhere. So, filtering out rejects, filtering out resistance. That's why, in case you were wondering. There's no harm in making these notes, mental notes, as we go along. The odd other individual did pop in last night, all capital letters, almost like Kathy Waters. And to be honest, don't know which video it was now, but I remember Kathy Waters left a comment recently saying, damn, Pancakes was right, you definitely need locking up or you need putting on medication. And really, my only response is, for someone that types in capital letters at all times, it's as if you're already in one, screaming, echoing out through the jail cells. What a shame. But at least you got a parrot or some kind of bird to keep you company. That's something, I guess. But we put that aside. Fairly good behaviour last night. And another acknowledgement is shout out to the people last night. I think it was Indiana, Badger, Cuppy, Starchasm maybe, and there might be the odd other person, I can't remember their name. Shout out to them for the super chats here and there last night. That was good of them. Also Cleo as well later on, so that's good of her. And it was also good that Cleo, you know, popped into the chat once again, because like this thing, you get these like original viewers. Let's say with the Dylan Brown's case, they can form some kind of structure, some kind of foundation. They can be the ones that bring the focus back, that can bring order back. You know what I'm saying? You might get these rejects that come in, you might get these ferals, these bandits, etc., and it's somewhat good, yeah, but there might be friction at times. But if you bring back these originals, they come on in, and then there's like a presence, and things settle down. So I think that's what Cleo is able to do as well, in a way, just like how other people have in recent time. So that's all good. And of course, Cuppy popping in once again, who's been around for a long time. Also, don't know if we'll see it in the comments of the last video what we're looking at. I think we will. OL Pricklebush or Pricklebrush showed up. The guy with the profile picture of that big bushy beard. He's a long-time viewer as well from the Kenny Veach days, and he actually returned just recent. So that's interesting to see. So you are seeing all these different people pop back up. Probably there's still some like missing, but maybe they'll show up at some point. You never know. But yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge all that. If I do think of anything else to point out, I will do. I guess what I will say is that with the Dylan Rounds coverage of the case, at least from my point of view on my channel, although being realistic, although statistically I'm at an all-time worse in terms of like views on videos for the past few months, that's partially because people have lost interest in the case. What I will say is the last few months have been the most successful on this channel in terms of clarity, in terms of trying to understand things finally, ironing out little details, clearing up bits of misinformation, tying up loose ends, in-depth discussions in the live chat without too much degenerative behaviour. So as one thing's gone down, many others have gone up in a positive way. And that's the exact stage I wanted to get to. It wasn't possible right at the beginning, those months ago. And then halfway through, it still wasn't quite possible. And you could blame it partially for the cause of all the other channels spreading all their BS or causing a lot of misdirection and distraction, right? But it's a stamina game. There'll always be some that have more stamina than me, right? I mean, just very obvious examples would be, I guess, Dylan Round's family. They're going to continue regardless because they have to, because they want to. Of course, it makes sense there. I don't have their stamina. But in terms of, unlike the YouTube platform, you know, other humans that might cause trouble, they run out of stamina, and you will see, whether it be them being boisterous most of the time, being verbal, having an attitude, it fades out eventually. Whether it be here or all over, they all fade away eventually because they run out of energy or they move on to something else. But still, last Centurion standing, here we are, okay? And it's been most effective the last month or two for key people coming on into the chat, into the comments, the right people as well, which is exactly how I had it constructed in my mind from day one. It would eventually get to this point, but it was the key factor of stamina, right? All the other stuff is going on and all the other noise. Maybe you can reduce it, right? Possibly. The rest of it, you just gotta put up with, and then eventually it passes. And that's what's happened. So there's a bit more clarity now. There's a bit more space to breathe, right? Sure, people will still be confused. There will still be a lot to take in, but it's probably arguably a little bit easier now than what it was back then, where arguably it was more chaotic, right? And the biggest thing to acknowledge is that while saying within the last few months it's been successful, at least covering the case and trying to understand it, as I said to you before, it was during a period, a phase, where there was less information and coverage compared to all the other times. A phase, a period of where it was mainly pure silence because of obviously Candice Cooley and the family keeping to themselves and working with the LE, right? There wasn't as much to talk about, not as many talking points, and yet we were able to continue. That is a key thing. If you can work with limited supplies, resources, materials, and perform as a whole, then when you do have all the material and supplies and resources, it'll be even easier and even better, right? So it's all under control, which is good, okay? But yeah, I think talked long enough about that, but key observations that need to be acknowledged, right? Let's head on over now to the YouTube comments of my previous video, as there are quite a few key talking points, and understand it from their point of view, answer any questions, and see if there's any updated information. You never know. Let's head on over right now. Right, so what we'll do, we'll start from the bottom, work our way up to the newest comments, okay? I see, we've got a fair few to get through, but we'll try and do it efficiently. So some of these comments here were posted before the live video premiere, so people were just getting prepared for it. Tom Evans, I'm so confused about the video, like so many things in this case, it does not make sense. One of those things where we go back over it, over and over again, not too repetitively, but we do like key little focus points of events that played out, maybe certain locations, and maybe if we can apply it visually, it might break up the confusion as well, right? People interpret it differently. So I think it's under control. What does Weezer say? Waiting patiently. Yeah, so Weezer's comment was before the video premiere at the time. But let's just see what's said here. Okay, this is a key talking point, right? Weezer said, I was at the Cowboy when I heard. We all felt relief. This was to do with hearing the news about Brenner being done for Dylan's death, okay? Murder charge, so reason. Weezer says, I just hope that Brenner starts talking and Dylan is located. Reminds me of something that Bibbins said previously, that maybe Brenner cut him up and he is scattered across the desert. So Bibbins is just giving his opinion, right? But what I will acknowledge is it's interesting for Bibbins to suggest that when we have heard it elsewhere mentioned by random people on YouTube who are psychics. You remember with the little spirit boxes communicating supposedly with Dylan, and one of them said, so what happened to you? And Dylan said, well, supposedly Dylan, which was probably a load of BS, said, cut up, body, something like that. And then that was like a talking point, and there was rumours spreading about saying that's what happened to Dylan. So what I want to ask you, Weezer, okay, Weezer, if you're currently here, feel free to answer this question. With Bibbins suggesting about Dylan being cut up into pieces, did Bibbins think of that himself, or did he listen to psychics out there, whether it be on YouTube or locally in real life? How did that come about, right? It's only because we're hearing it elsewhere, externally, beforehand, it's making me think. If Kurt Wadsworth can supposedly be influenced by a psychic in the early days to suggest that Dylan's held hostage, then maybe it's happened with other Montello locals, right? Such as Bibbins. Just feel free to answer it if you can. Anything else? What's this one? Weezy, you've been terrific. So I've been absent. I think Marshall should be banned from your town. What a low-life salty is. Okay. Anyway, move on. Indiana. Thank heavens Utah brought back the death penalty last year. It may be the only bargaining tool left in the box if Brenner refuses to say where Dylan's body is. True, possibility is the thing. If Brenner does receive the death penalty and it's over and done with like that, you don't get the true justice. it's better for Brenna to be locked up in prison for as long as possible, because you get more justice out of that, right? It's not the easy way out. But you don't want Brenna to be just sentenced to death just like that, because, you want answers from him. But you can use that method almost as a bargaining chip, possibly. But I guess it all depends what mindset Brenna's in. If Brenna is like, I've got nothing to lose, so who cares? If I can have some form of control, such as playing mind games, suggesting where Dylan could be, but lying about it, because he has lied before, he might get off from that. He might enjoy having some little form of power he's got left, which is the key to Dylan. You get what I'm saying? As well, you've got to take in mind as well, it's kind of like a ticking thing, not just with age, not just with the potential, the death penalty, but the actual health of the individual, the health of Brenna. Not that it applies to everyone, but sometimes, maybe down to age, down to health, it could impact one's memory. Maybe, it's not a guarantee. So if Brenna did become ill for whatever reason, that could impact whether he confesses or not, whether he tells the truth or not. So, you kind of like want it done as soon as possible, but it just depends what frame of mind Brenna's in, end of the day. What's this? Let's hope his life meant something to him and gives it a bargain for Dylan's whereabouts. I mean, we did see previously, and I think it was on, it was that article by that woman, I think she was called Stephanie, who shared it, or it was reposted on the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page. Stephanie wrote her own blog article of the Dylan Rounds case, saying that the parents may have to make a deal with the devil, Brenna. So there is that. But then some other people were saying probably not the parents due to the situation and scenario and for legal reasons, but maybe it could be higher ups and status and authority that end up bargaining with Brenna, possibly. What else? Linda, it's been a long time coming for Brenna. Now he's gone. Get just cause, right? Badger Life says, do you think Salty Pancake's head will apologise for his actions today? Hell no. He's playing the Doug no thanks grift like a dead horse. I don't really quite understand that, but yeah. I don't know if it was by Badger or by someone else, but they were saying how due to the recent action, as well past actions of Salty Pancakes, but more so his viewers, for their opinions, for them supposedly spreading and causing misinformation, disruption, maybe slander and all kinds of chaos, will they ever apologise? I think that's what Badger said. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know someone definitely said it recently. In my opinion, just roughly speaking, if that's what they're responsible for, as you know, I've not looked too deep into it because I keep my head down, keep to myself and do my own videos. But if that is the case, I don't think they would apologise. No, not at all, if that was the case. I feel that what humans will tend to do is they can act like tossers, be pricks, but then they do some kind of memory wipe refresh thing where they're like, oh, I don't remember of saying any of that or doing any of that in the past. And all of a sudden now they've suddenly changed. They're on this side, supporting this argument, thinking this way, behaving that way. And it's like nothing ever changed. So it's a load of BS. I've come across people in the past who have been more manipulative, who've faked or abused, overused the odd mental health card to excuse their memory loss for bad actions they've done to me in the past. And to be honest, if I allowed that, then they could have done anything, said anything, physical, verbal, and gotten away with it. And it just would have been a refresh every time, not falling for it. So on a much, much smaller, less in-depth scale, I can imagine the memory wipe transition will take place, right? Maybe you've seen it with the main content creators on YouTube, how they've switched sides and switched stories within the case, who they've associated with, who they no longer. I think it can apply to the viewers as well, externally. Okay, let's move on. Wrangle, inhabitant, said, I would like to see what video Dylan's phone just made. Blood-soaked, fat, badass dancing in the room cleaning the gun. Okay. Personally, I don't know if that video will be public to watch. I think in the future, there's a small chance, but at this moment in time, not at all, because it's part of the case. Don't want to mess it up. I just feel like that video, if you really wanted to get a hold of it, I guess the only ways would be via a key contact who's within, I guess, the case, or, you know, who has access to this material, or by going on a dodgy website, one of those gory websites or crime ones, and finding it that way. But someone has to leak it in the first place. And personally, I think it would be too messy and cause too much issue, right? Maybe way down the line, something might be showing up. But I just feel like with it being a sensitive video, not that it's going to make me cry and have a breakdown, but it would be labelled as a sensitive video considering what it's about and post Dylan and everything. I just don't think it would be viewable. I know you'll get the true crime people, the true crime fanatics, the ones who have deep, dark obsessions, etc., interest in all that. But, you know, if it ever does happen, it's only a small chance, I would say. We've got Glitter Galaxy. Sounds like the phone is always recording at all times. Are you talking about the time-lapse feature? There we go. We've got Old Prickle Bush. The time-lapsed video sounds like a potential misrepresentation. Maybe it's a short clip someone has mislabeled, knowing these low-tech desert hillbillies. It's a clip, not a sophisticated time-lapse shot. That's a possibility. But what I did do as a little update, when I did check my phone afterwards, I went on the camera mode, clicked on video, and then it gave me the options of the different video recordings, and it literally said time lapse, exactly worded how it's been worded in the articles. So that's literally what it is, time lapse video, right? And if you want a brief definition of it, it's as if you got your phone or your camera, which does it, and you point it up at the sky, the clouds, or you put the phone, rest it up against something in front of a plant, and you leave it there recording for days upon days, pushing it up to a month, recording 24/7. Once you stopped recording, providing you got the storage and space, it basically turns a 12, 20, 40 hour long video into a 5, 10, 15 minute video sped up on ×2 speed, okay? It's like you only notice the actual change, the true change, if it's sped up. You get me? So you see a plant growing, you take a photo every single day. It's kind of like that, and then you speed it up. Almost like stop motion in a way. The faster it is, the smoother the transition and the change is noticeable, okay? So if that really is the case with Dylan, why would Dylan have time-lapse selected? And how could you notice all the key details of Brenner cleaning the gun and with blood on the arm? What I'm saying is, if it wasn't recording that long, let's say, it would still be sped up because it's time-lapse. So it could be like a 2-second video. I mean, the original time-lapse could be 10, 30 minutes, maybe an hour long. I'm not quite sure the length. But the actual post time-lapse, right, when you play it back, when it's sped up, it probably only is 2 minutes long, if not under that. And because the video plays that fast, it's do you actually see anything? Well, you must do for them to give out those details. So it still kind of makes me think in the back of my mind that they may have used the wrong terminology, right? I mean, if it was Dylan responsible for this recording, he did it for a reason. Maybe Dylan selected the wrong recording option just simply because, heat of the moment, you can't think straight, you're in a messy situation. You're bound to make a mistake, but it was good enough that if Dylan was the one responsible for recording it, he was able to think of it on the spot despite the possible outcome, whatever was going through his mind at the time, right? So there is that. But if it truly was a time lapse and there was a reason behind it, the only other way would be, and I think it was suggested by Weezer or maybe Indiana last night in the chat, that maybe Dylan wanted to do a time-lapse video of his crop to watch it grow. And he left it on too long, maybe, and it was still recording after when Dylan had the phone in his hand. Brenner did what he did, and then Brenner got a hold of Dylan's phone, placed it on the side, and because it was still recording, still rolling, it caught Brenner in that way. That's the only way I can think of it, right? But you got to take in mind, if you're doing these time-lapse videos, especially on a mobile device, it's very demanding, both the storage and the battery drain, right? Yeah, you get professional photography, videography, which will use high-end cameras, video recorders, sure, and they'll have the storage and probably the battery life. But when you're doing it on a phone, it's more gimmicky, right? I mean, it can still be usable, but it's just a bit more gimmicky because a phone isn't just for pure photography or videography, right? But it's like a jack of all trades. It does a bit of everything. Obviously, with technology improving, it will get more practical to use, I guess, with time, but it does have its limitations still. But yeah, just wanted to talk about that point briefly now, just in case I forget afterwards, right? Old Pricklebush also says, I assume the desecration charge is connected to evidence that Brenner burned Dylan's body at some point. I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, when I used to hear the word desecration, desecrated, I was under the impression it's to do with a burial, a sacred place, some kind of memorial, some kind of grave you go to, you disrespect it, you kick the dirt up, you break stuff. Basically, you cause disruption to this resting place, almost causing unrest in a way. You get me? Because when I was playing Assassin's Creed Origins in the past 2016 video game, because it was in ancient Egypt, you go to these tombs and these burials, and there was the odd mission where you had to find the perpetrator responsible for someone desecrating an old ancient tomb, okay? So that's what I based the definition on. Though desecration to a body can apply in damaging, burning, breaking it down, or concealing or moving it elsewhere. So there's, do you call it an umbrella term? There's a lot of different conditions. There's a lot of different methods which can be classified and labelled as desecration. So, breaking it up, burning it down, or simply concealing or moving it away. It's all the same thing, right? That's what it means, desecration. So Brenner may have burned Dylan, or suggested by Weezer, passing on from what Bibbins said, could have been chopped up. But as for the burning, don't think it's possible because you need it to be really hot. Think of those ovens. Okay, even Auschwitz with those ovens, right, to turn into ash, breaking it down, intense, demanding heat. You're going to get that in lucin? Likely not. Is there other methods? I guess. People suggested a tub, some kind of bath, acid, break it down that way, maybe. A fire, We have seen fires there, like the little burning barrels, but I think that was just for other stuff, and maybe not as relevant. I guess it depends how you interpret it, right? Chopped up, could be a possibility. Could it apply to the bin bags? Maybe. If that really, really was the case, it would make it significantly harder to find Dylan in a way, especially when spread out. But the important thing would be, can they find any evidence of a tool, a saw blade, a knife, something like that was used to break up body parts, right? Because if not, then that probably didn't happen. I just feel, just in my opinion at least, that Brenner either temporarily buried Dylan because he was in a rush, and then he had to move it after to ensure a higher chance of Dylan not being found, or Brenner did bury Dylan in a spot which he felt confident with, but then being questioned by police, the police presence, the search and rescues, him being interviewed, etc. In the early days, he felt like, oh, maybe I should move Dylan now just to be safe. And then after that, he was arrested, but it was too late by then. He did what he did, desecrated Dylan. You get what I'm saying? That's the way I see it, at least. What does Joseph say? Hope everyone's doing well. I think Don Hately may end up being a witness in seclusion. He knew 2 weeks in that something was up and returned the guns over right away, and he passed the polygraph test. Yeah, I get that. The guns being which Brenner handed on over to Don to, keep safe because it wasn't practical in Brenner's situation. Hear about Dylan's disappearance. Don may tie one thing with another and assume, oh, maybe Brenner's responsible. That's why he's handing the guns over to me. I don't want to be brought into this. I don't want to be incriminated. I'll clear my name now and, just cover my own back. Maybe that was going through Don Hately's mind. Maybe it wasn't being a snake in the grass, but more so protecting your own self so you don't get dragged into stuff. Joseph also says he could very well be important as he was the only one that saw Brenner that we know of. Kurt Wadsworth bleaching the trailer to hide something, most likely to hide any residue of drugs. Justin sat at that pole barn looking at that hole. He had to know that Dylan had been there. Breaks my heart to think Dylan recorded his own murder. It's both bad and messed up, but also, if that really was the case, very, very smart. It was like, I can't get out of this, but I'm at least going to document it for the whole world to see, maybe not literally, so it can at least solve the case. And I think most of the time, people aren't able to do that because they may be in shock, might not be able to think straight. You're in a moment like that, a life or death situation, you might not be able to take everything into, context. Think of the correct choices to make at that last moment of breath. We'll do a poll right now. Do you agree with Joseph? Do you think that Don Hately could be some kind of witness? Whether it be a witness in protection, a witness right now or down the line. Do you think Don is innocent and may work with the police in some way? What do you think? I'm not quite sure the best way to word it, but I'm sure I'll think of something. And just make sure to vote. See what you think. Tom, this is a video that I'm going to have to listen a couple of times. Understandable. What's this? Badger Life. Well, Joy Perry is Jim Terry. Joy Perry first originated from the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page community. I remember seeing her comments and then she popped up eventually. We got Cleo, thank you for going over the articles, etc., reading with us. Shout out to Cleo, the playful witch. Wes, got Wes there. We got Victoria Van Cartier saying a sad ending. It's one of those things where it's a sad ending, but it's not the complete end. There is still stuff to do and progress to be made. Maybe 50%, over the line, like with the charges being put in place officially. Yeah. Also, shout out to Victoria. It's good of her to pop back in. She's been somewhat of a long time viewer as well. So yeah, that's good. We got Cat Loves. I agree. How would they know the corpse was desecrated unless he admitted to it? Well, I'll answer this right now, okay? Maybe we can bring it up again. Hopefully you're listening, Cat Loves ASMR. Basically, whether it be the LE or some other group, somehow they managed to come across a spot, the burial site of Dylan Rounds. But the reason why Dylan was no longer there was because back in the past, before Brenner was arrested, Brenner moved Dylan and put him elsewhere. The motive to that is unknown of. How would the police, let's say, know that this was the spot Dylan was at? Well, maybe first of all, they looked at areas of interest for soil disturbance and they thought this was a potential spot, or it really highlighted it, there was a clue. And then upon digging it up, although Dylan is no longer there, most likely some kind of DNA was left behind, whether it be blood, bodily fluids, like the body decomposing, let's say, something like that. Or maybe there was something physical, like a little bit of cloth or a little bit of bone or the odd tooth. I don't know. But most likely what they would have done is taken a soil sample, and then that would have highlighted if there was any DNA found there. And then upon finding out about that through the labs, they could say, this is where Dylan was at, but due to desecration, no longer there. He's elsewhere. Hopefully that clears that up, okay? What I do want to say is it does acknowledge a positive that if the police were able to do that and find Dylan's original resting spot without Brenner confessing at all, then it was somewhat of a success to an extent. And that they were so close, yet so far away, but they didn't have to rely on a confession. You get what I'm saying? There's still some hope. There's still a chance that they can find Dylan a second time round, truly. We've got Patsy. Shout out to Patsy. She says, I'm imagining this monster that is James Brenner started the video on purpose and rambled to himself what we had done and what he's going to do with Dylan's body. Can't get that out of my mind. Sickening that LE didn't arrest him sooner based on his warrant. They continue to let him live on the property and remove evidence. It seems to be the case. I mean, ultimately, we really need to know, when did Brenner cause the desecration to Dylan? Was it immediately after the 28th, maybe the 29th or the 30th, around then? Or was it going into June, mid-June, but before the 16th, when he was truly arrested? You get what I'm saying? There's a certain period where the LE aren't to blame, but then if you go past that period, almost like a void spot of at least 8 to 10 days of walking free when he should have been taken away. If it happened in that space, then you could say the LE are somewhat responsible, right? But we can't do too much of the blame game or witch hunt at this moment in time because we don't ultimately know when it exactly happened, the desecration, okay? The bit about Brenner purposely recording the video, I mean, a slight possibility as well, because we did touch upon it in the previous discussion. You've got serial killers out there. I know it's different that, but they might record videos like documenting what they've done, talking about how they think, how they feel, as well as taking away items as mementos. All kinds of odd, unusual behaviour can occur, right? It's just how it is. Brenner doesn't appear to be a serial killer, but he's a serial offender. That's the correct wording of it. He keeps reoffending, not helping himself, causing trouble towards other people, and this time it was much more fatal than ever. I know a couple of people, or maybe the odd one, has said about, oh, you should have looked back at North Dakota and what went on there. It's really bad. And it's like, okay, but why are we talking vaguely? You know, I have typed in Brenner's name before on the Google search, but probably because I'm not from the US, I'm limited to search results, okay? I've typed in Brenner's name, I've typed in his full name, I've typed in the name of the place, and it just doesn't come up with any news, okay? I have tried, I've not found anything. So if anyone knows about this supposed really bad, messed up crime stuff, which Brenner's responsible for in North Dakota way back then, feel free to explain and elaborate down below, because if it has any links, any key patterns to what's being seen and displayed here, then it needs to be addressed, okay? Simple as. But the video itself, whether it was intentional or not, yes, it does make you think, Patsy, was Brenner rambling or ranting onto himself as he was just sat there? Maybe he was demonstrating introspection, talking it through to himself, thinking, I wonder what I should do next. I wonder where I should take Dylan. Maybe there's a small possibility that that video may have hinted and led to the police going to that first burial site. Maybe Brenner did give it away and say where he was roughly going to go. And that's why the police used that video, that evidence, to get to that spot. Which is still a positive, right? If it's Dylan that was responsible for recording, he kind of helped solve his own murder case in a way, which you shouldn't have to, but there's a chance he has or attempted, which is quite advanced. I mean, have I ever seen anything like this before? Only in a video game, but that was a detective that died, came back as a ghost and solved his own murder case or something. I can't remember the name of the game. It was some detective one, and it was on Xbox. It was a free game at one point in the past, and it was quite good. You could walk through walls, you could activate things. It was interesting. I just can't remember the name. And it was to do with the Salem witch trials. It was in Salem, this video game detective. Maybe some of you may know. But yeah, what's the responses? I missed understanding the time-lapse video. What would the sound be like on a time-lapse video? Would it be sped up as well, or would there be any sound at all? That's a good point, Patsy. From my experience, at least on mobile, there is no sound whatsoever. No sound. Maybe on a proper professional camera, video camcorder, whatever you call it, there might be sound. But I feel that there might not be sound there either, because since it's so sped up, any sound would be sped up as well, and it would probably be distorted, and it probably could ruin the video itself, so maybe they don't incorporate it. I mean, when it comes to slow motion, that's different. There is sound included. But from my experience, at least, time-lapse, no sound. Okay. What's this? Patsy also says, I later asked myself, this monster knowingly recorded himself, then put, okay, why not destroy, as in crushing the hell out of it? The answer was not an intelligent monster, or he didn't know the phone was recording. True. I mean, with Brenner chucking Dylan's phone into Lucin Pond, that was basically to dispose of some evidence in a way, but also because maybe the tracker on the phone, maybe he felt like he could have been tracked down if he was in possession of the phone. So he wanted to get rid of that first before maybe disposing of Dylan, right? And maybe Brenner felt like if there was any text messages, conversations, calls, or any of that, or any media, without thinking too deep, he probably just thought that by throwing the phone into the pond, water damage, wear and tear, it would ruin it. it would make all the files corrupt, end of. But obviously with technology and the way things go these days, you can think you've got rid of traces of something, of someone, or maybe of yourself, but there's always some data left lurking elsewhere, such as the cloud, iCloud, Microsoft Cloud, and all the other ones in between, right? And maybe Dylan had iCloud turned on because he had an iPhone. iPhone does have iCloud, right? I have mine turned off because I just can't be bothered with it. So even if Brenner deleted that video, which must have been done because the family did clone Dylan Round's phone and said there was nothing found on it, nothing dodgy, nothing out of the ordinary. So the video must have already been deleted by Brenner, but it was also automatically uploaded to iCloud, and maybe that's how they found the traces of it, the police, when they looked deeper, possibly. Because, it seems as if maybe Brenner may have looked at the phone at some point and realised, oh shit, it's on record. Right, I better delete that video. And then he's thinking, oh, that was a close shave. But unknown to him, it's already been saved to iCloud, maybe. I mean, if the, if the criminal, the one responsible, Brenner, if he was much younger and more aware of technology, a little bit more alert as well, then maybe these traces, this evidence probably would never have been found or existed, right? Because they would have been more cautious. But if you're not completely aware of all the different technology, the loopholes, the ins and outs, then, things can backfire on you. We've got another comment here by HikerX saying, I think desecration of a corpse means to either excuse the term cut up or burn. Liz Hernandez, it can be anything from dismembering to hiding or just disrespecting in some manner. That's true. Glow Monster. Who is Glow Monster? Have I seen them before? I think I've seen Glow Monster before. Is that Melinda? I'm not quite sure. But Glow Monster says Jim may have killed Dylan, but Dylan still got the final say. I do hope Dylan hit record. Yeah, I can understand that. But if Dylan felt threatened, why pull your phone out when you've got a gun? Or did Dylan just not have it on him at the time? Maybe. It's maybe you get some degenerates these days in cities that will pull the phone out immediately in any sign of trouble, commotion, confrontation, and they'll be like, I've got this on record, I've got this live, everyone's going to see it, you can't touch me, you can't do anything to me. That type of toxic behaviour. So you can't defend yourself, you can't do anything, you can't say anything because you're being recorded. And sometimes it can work out for them. But for Dylan, though, he pulls his phone out, I'm recording. I don't think Brenner would give a damn. You know what I'm saying? I just don't think he would really care. But if Dylan didn't have the gun on him, or his gun, then he couldn't really do much else, right? I mean, did Dylan even defend himself? I mean, there's a lot of questions, right? The whole pulling out the phone, if that really was the case, and recording, was it ultimately true? Well, it's not confirmed yet. And as well, all I want to say is, has Dylan been known to do this before? Considering Montello has had a lot of crime with time and a lot of confrontation and maybe drama in between and all kinds of conflict, if Dylan was ever in the presence of that, heard about the stories, whether he got in arguments or not, did he ever pull out the phone in the past and record something? It has been talks in the past where supposedly Dylan had an argument with Ed Harshberger at one point, that Dylan had a confrontation with Brenner, Don, and maybe Kurt, and they were arguing towards Dylan. With Dylan having a work dispute argument with Don Haley. Out of all those like moments, those times, did Dylan ever pull out his phone then and record something, but then delete it afterwards because it wasn't needed as evidence? You get what I'm saying? Or was it a first time when being confronted with Brenner? You know, what would go through your mind to make you think, right, I need to pull my phone out now, considering it may have never been done beforehand? What triggered it? And then if that's not the case, and it's more so that Dylan has been known to do this in the past, pulling out his phone, recording it as evidence, then that isn't exactly good. You shouldn't have to do that. Just like how, like with the UK, you get these people that come out with these excuses. Oh, I walk around with a knife to protect myself. You shouldn't have to be in that position in the first place. So just like with Dylan, if Dylan felt like he needed his phone for protection, to protect himself, to document, record evidence at any point, any time, then clearly it shows that Dylan was cautious of where he was at and not quite settled, and maybe quite cautious, high tension, high alert, and that knowing of the presence nearby or from afar, that there's danger, criminal activity. I don't know if that really was the case. And it's like, well, why did Dylan put up with that? Or is it just because he was so passionate about farming? No choice. This is what you got to start thinking. It goes a little bit deep, doesn't it? But let's just continue reading. Hi, Corrects. The death of Dylan by this monster from hell brings me great sadness. Dylan was such a beautiful and kind soul, and his life should never have been cut short this way. Brenner and anyone else involved in this crime bring justice to the horrible event. Rest in peace, Dylan. Hi, Corrects also says, I've accidentally recorded short videos, but maybe Brenner thought Dylan was dead after he shot him, and Dylan was able to do it himself and put it back in his pocket. Later, Brenner probably checked Dylan's pockets for a cell phone and afterwards threw it in the pond. Possibility, yeah. What's this one? Hi, Corrects. I'm a Christian, but sometimes I wish they would bring back public hanging. Brenner was an idiot. That was very evident. One thing that always bothered me was the phone call to his grandmother. He couldn't get all his seed planted, had some still in the grain truck with not a very waterproof tarp over it. It had started to rain and he wanted to get the truck in the grain shed. If so, why would he phone his grandmother only to say, hello, I can't talk right now. I have to get the grain into the grain shed. Why would he even call at that moment? Because it was someone trying to sound like Dylan to make everyone think Dylan was still alive at that time. Another thing that didn't sit well with me was how Candice always referred to Dylan as the kid. The kid worked hard, the kid wasn't lazy, the kid knew farming. Any 19-year-old as responsible as Dylan wouldn't be pissed off always being referred to as a kid. She never showed the emotion a mother would naturally have had in these circumstances. I'm glad they found the killer, but I still find her demeanour not one of a loving, broken-hearted mother. Okay. So where do we start here? The bit about Dylan calling the grandmother temporary and just saying, right, I've got to do this, got to do that. Supposedly, from what Candice Cooley had said previous in past interviews, Dylan was known for doing that, giving little informal, brief updates of his day-to-day life, what he's going to do, what he is doing, what he has done, and he would always report back afterwards or later on to say how it went. So it's very abrupt, it was very brief. He'd make a quick call and then he'd probably be sidetracked and put the phone down. Interpreted as rude, but the parents, the family understood Dylan, so they didn't find it suspicious. Though they did find it a bit odd when Dylan did not call back after making a promise that he would, right? I mean, if it's someone trying to impersonate Dylan, who could impersonate Dylan's voice? You know what I'm saying? Like, you do impressions of people, it's not always accurate the way it sounds, right? Okay, ironic saying that considering I've done many impressions, yeah, but you got to think of the age of the person as well. If you're a certain age, it can be harder to do certain voices, right? Sometimes you can tell roughly, very roughly, the age of a person based off their voice and tone. Not always the case, but it can be more so, right? And because limited people are in the area of lucin and about, who's going to come on in and pull off a Dylan Rounds impression voice? Just doesn't seem that likely. And if someone like Brenner or Don tried, I just don't think they could do an impression. It'd probably sound rough, gravelly, the voice, maybe. As for visually, well, that doesn't seem to be the case. Though, kind of unrelated, with times some people have said that I look like Dylan Rounds, which is a little bit odd. Or I look like a Browns family member or something. Was there anything else to highlight here? Dylan being labelled as a kid. I don't really see that as odd or suspicious. I mean, from time to time, maybe I've been called that or something similar by just like other people, but it was just like very casual. It wasn't that serious, but I guess people just interpret things differently. Hi, corrects. I think they will find Dylan in the white trash bags that were taken to the landfill or wherever they took them. Maybe. Wendell Lollis, shout out new viewer to Wendell. Since the body has not been found, maybe the desecration charge is solely based on the body being removed from the scene of the crime and hidden or disposed of, just in addition to Brenner's. Yeah, that's kind of like what I've said previous. Yeah. Terry says, look at Lance's video from Friday. That is where I heard it from first. Jacqueline Rampley, I watched Lance on Friday. Can you remember him mentioning a backhoe bucket having Dylan's DNA in it or on it? I wondered if Brenner used the backhoe to move body and bury it somewhere else. Indiana did touch upon it, I think, last night, saying that Dylan is probably buried underneath the backhoe. That under the bucket or something there is blood or was blood. And it's like, it's interesting, yeah. I feel like I don't want to get too lost or deep down that route, just in case it turns out to be misinformation. Might have to look into it a little bit more. If anyone else can reinforce it about the backhoe, if there's like anything else to strengthen it, truly strengthen it, then maybe it's worth looking at. I've looked at the backhoe myself. We've analysed it up close. I did acknowledge that, like the bucket area, the shovel part at the front, it did look like it's been used. Yeah, it does look like it's been used. But it was said that the backhoe was used anyway when draining the pond. So maybe the usage of the backhoe post Dylan's disappearance might have contaminated, ruined potential evidence from it. Do you agree? Possibility. Did ask Indiana, though, that if Dylan's under the backhoe where it's currently stationed at, or was at least at the grain shed, then the ground itself, soil disturbance, right? Maybe the backhoe obscuring it. But Indiana worded it more so as, well, it would just be naturally seen as soil disturbance because of vehicles parked there, which I can kind of understand. Ground could be disturbed if a vehicle's been nearby. But, to be honest, the way I see it would be, you use a full spectral drone, you look at soil disturbance, any place, any area, and you notice, soil disturbance right there, backhoe on top of it. Nothing odd about that. Though, have we actually checked that area before? No. Oh, maybe we should take a look. That's what I would say. And as well, if it was like parked up right next to the dirt mound, you could get away with it. Because as I said, if you was to place Dylan nearby to an area that has already been extensively searched and there's been soil disturbance, if you did scan back over the area and noticed, dirt mound, just using it as a rough example, dirt mound, soil disturbance, also recently where someone removed a body to that spot. And it's like, oh, well, we're not going to think of that. All we're going to associate with is the reason why there's soil disturbance there is because we were the ones that investigated it to begin with. So it's just picking that back up. I mean, if it truly gave, and I don't think it does, but if it truly somehow managed to give a date, a time, a year, a day, a month, very, very specific dates and timing, and you could compare it. So that soil disturbance was done 2022, June the 4th. But this soil disturbance right next to it was done 2022, June the 12th. Oh, well, we remember doing it on June the 4th. But June the 12th, no, we never dug it back up. So who else did? Oh, maybe it was Brenner. You know, it doesn't do that from what I know of, the full spectral drone, the soil disturbance. If it did, it would be very, very efficient, I would say. And when I was talking about the dirt mound or where Dylan's at, I wasn't saying that is where he's been placed. I was using a rough example to explain my point, okay? You can upload to cloud, yeah, and it probably does it automatically as well if you have it turned on. Jacqueline Rampley says, I'm pleased Brenner has now been charged, but I'm puzzled as to why Candice was happy to let Dylan be in the desert with such a vicious bad man. Brenner has been known by her for years and years. My brain is spinning. I mean, it's a fair point in a way. Candice Cooley said in her defence that she never knew of Brenner's background history. And maybe in a way, you probably normally wouldn't look into someone's background history unless you were suspicious of them to begin with, right? If Brenner didn't show any signs of that back then there'd probably be no need to do a background check, in a way. I mean, I know some people will probably still disagree, but that's just the way how I see things. But yeah, with Brenner living on site as where Candice Cooley lived, or was living at a point, I think that was due to the custom farming, with Brenner not only being in the presence of Dylan, but also the presence of Candice Cooley and their family. It's like, well, did Brenner do anything suspicious then? Did he ever cause trouble? You know, with him supposedly not liking people being in his presence, and yet he managed to put up with it back then. Like, did he have more self-control then, or was there a deeper reason? Or, you know, what? Jacqueline says, I did hear that Dylan's DNA was also found on a bucket of a backhoe. Might have been Nate on East Idaho News or Lance on his site on Friday. Well, the previous person lower down in the comment section said about Lance. Just to strengthen it and reinforce it, Indiana, if you're currently here, that information you heard about the bucket of the backhoe, Dylan's DNA found on it, or some blood, whatever, did you hear about it on the East Idaho News channel or on Lance's live stream? Let me know. From all of the articles I have read, such as like from yesterday, I did not see a single bit of news coverage, information, or even in the official documents or the official press release, nothing mentioned about the backhoe. So who else would know of that? And how would Lance know about it if the official documents aren't even talking about it? You know what I'm saying? Unless the authorities, LE, know about it, but they've just not released that part because it's very important, but somehow it's been leaked out to some people out there, like Lance Kelly. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Okay, what's this? Jacqueline Rampley. I don't have an iPhone, but from what I've heard, iPhone can receive videos without anyone touching phone. E.g., if you have an outdoor camera, this can be linked to iPhone and it will send time-stamped videos to your phone. Hey guys, I'm close in what I'm trying to say. Please. Please what? Well, Jacqueline does have a point. Recently, I don't know if it's directly to do with iPhone. I think it might. There was a YouTube channel what's his name called? Whistling Dave or something. Bit of a droopy face. But he did a video in recent time where he had cameras set up on his property or former property, had a few items, crates. Locals went there, stole them, kind of like blacked out the camera as well with spray paint. But Whistling Dave was able to receive still photos of the people responsible for it, because the camera's linked with the device of the phone, and he could request any photos or videos at a time if someone was in the presence of the camera. So there is that. Also, you can get it with like Apple AirTags or something, these circular badges which can be applied to an object or anything dumped somewhere, and provided you got it linked up with your iPhone or someone's iPhone in the proximity, it will reveal a rough location of where that AirTag is. So that's another way of doing it. And finally, Timothy Matson, new viewer, shout out to Timmy, says, way to go, Dylan. Might been able to put it on video mode before it went down. I kind of understand what he's going on about, whether it be before he was going to die, switching it to record. I mean, it was smart in a way, because you could have just simply turned on the audio recorder. That's another method. But to actually have video footage as well as audio too, that's just a lot more aware, a lot more cautious, right? So yeah, very interesting. Right, so that was interesting, reading through all those comments and different points of views. Hopefully I was able to answer some of the questions. Of course, if you've got any more, feel free to list them down below. I'm sure they can be answered, reinforced or debunked as we do go along, of course. I was going to talk a bit more about, the finding Dylan in terms of the phone, the video, but I think I probably talked about that in those comments when responding back. It was kind of like a bulk part. I was going to do a dedicated part now to talking, but I guess I've already mentioned it back there. But what I'll say in brief is you've either got the possibility that Dylan's phone, Dylan's camera recording a video was done either accidental, which seems very unlikely. It was either recorded by Brenner himself for some unknown reason, or it was done by Dylan as a last-ditch attempt of documenting, defending himself in some way. Maybe Dylan thought that if he recorded it on camera, then he could use it against Brenner and say, you can't do anything to me, I've got this on record, you've got a criminal history, you'll go back to jail if I send this to the police. So that has been done in the past where people have blackmailed someone else. That's normally after an event, whereas in this case it couldn't have been after an event because Dylan would have been long gone by then. Although he was anyway, I think Dylan may have been recording it to defend himself. Maybe because he didn't have his gun to defend himself with. Do you agree with that? We'll do a poll now, right? Word it in such a way. If Dylan was the one recording, started the video recording, do you think he did that as a method of defending himself because he did not have his gun with him at the time to defend himself that way? Do you agree or not? Let me know your thoughts. And as well, still the question is, looks to be a gun that was used, because why else would Brenner be cleaning it and why else would he have blood on it? Normally you clean your gun after it's been used, right? One of the reasons. But what gun was it? That's not been talked about, but I have a feeling that the LE will know in a way, because they said, well, they pointed out that Brenner was cleaning a gun. So they would have, first of all, they know it's a gun, so they would have seen it's a gun, they would have seen maybe the model, the make, the type. Is it a handgun, a revolver, a pistol, a rifle, what? Only they will know. I don't know. Does anyone else know? Because it's like trying to understand, is it the .22 rifle? Is it some other rifle? Is it Brenner's own chrome pistol, which has still been missing, supposedly, as mentioned by Ty Corbin? or is it Dylan's own pistol, Dylan's handgun? But if that was the case, whether it be in Dylan's pickup truck as it normally is, as described by Candice Cooley, or if it was in the trailer and it was never moved, then that kind of like goes against Brenner using that gun. But I think that's just a rumour. Well, regardless, if Brenner did use Dylan's gun, I kind of understand it. I kind of understand where this could be going, okay? It's not for definite, but it just kind of makes sense. If you think about it, Lance Kelly, before Friday, before all this breaking news, Lance Kelly said that he believes Dylan is in the mountains somewhere. You remember that video, what I did? You remember that? I think it was titled, Does Lance Kelly Know of Secret Evidence or something? And that was before Friday, gone. It kind of makes sense now to why you would think Dylan is in the mountains, because he's not been found at the farm. And the reason why he's not been found at the farm or near that area is because he's no longer there because of desecration. Brenner did put him there at one point, but then moved him afterwards and maybe more into the mountains. So that kind of makes more sense, backs up the reasoning to why Lance Kelly, but also Ty Corbin himself, believe that Dylan is in the mountains somewhere. Because he's not at the farm or that area, because he's no longer there. But what I want to say is, how did Lance Kelly know about this, supposedly, before it even came out public? Was it just Lance Kelly guessing? Just giving his opinion, which was a coincidence in which it was actually reinforced and strengthened by a fact? What's your thoughts? It's a very important point. It's like Lance Kelly predicted the future in a short space of time. Do you understand that? Or was it just him loosely guessing? It's just interesting that. And then with regards to the gun, or a gun that was being cleaned by Brenner, I assume Brenner's cleaning it of evidence, fingerprints, I assume. Well, if that's the case, then basically that gun doesn't have any evidence, DNA, fingerprints on it. And what gun was found which had no fingerprints, DNA on it because it was cleaned, as worded by Candice Cooley? Dylan Round's gun, which was taken away originally and then returned back post Dylan's disappearance, early June. You see where it's going? Was the gun in that video on Dylan Round's phone of Brenner cleaning the gun Dylan Round's gun? And that's why, when it was returned, there was no prints on it. Do you see how it links together? Is that the case? Just feels really deep, to be honest. But yeah. If that really was the case, the next question I have is, how did Brenner get a hold of that gun in the first place? You get what I'm saying? There's a lot of conditional things here, and there's a lot of visual cues we need to try and map out, but I don't know if we can do it on the spot right now. I mean, we can go onto the map in a second just to briefly summarise it, okay, just for the people that pick up on it more visually. I feel like maybe we can do more of a dedicated video down the line if there are some new updates. Do you understand? Yeah? What we need to do now is move on to something more formal, more new, more relevant, and it's the latest response by Candice Cooley, okay? There will be videos available to watch online, of course, but we need to look at the transcript, actual word-for-word language, and the quotes as well by her. I think it's by KSL News once again. So let's go onto that website now, read it through, see what Candice Cooley has to say, and get to the bottom of it, okay? Right, so here we are, the title of this article, in quotes, "We have fought so hard for charges. Dylan Round's mother reacts to murder charge in son's disappearance," by Lad Egan and Larry D. Curtis, March the 4th, 2023, 9:36 p.m, updated 9:38 p.m, okay? This is arguably more recent. Box Elder County, Utah. A day after formal murder and desecration of a body charges were filed in her son's disappearance, Dylan Round's mother is speaking out about the last 9 months. In quotes, knowing who our son was, knowing what he would do in our position is what has kept me going forwards, said Candice Cooley. Cooley said Dylan Rounds was a hard worker who dreamed of being a big farmer. He was 19 when he vanished from the tiny town of Lucin on the Utah-Nevada border in May 2022. Well, I wouldn't say that it was on the Utah-Nevada border exactly. Well, maybe Lucin itself, the name of it. I think it was worded in the past as Dylan's farm on the border, and that was kind of wrong. But never mind, let's just carry on reading. Candice Cooley said the last 9 months had been a difficult, frustrating roller coaster of emotions. In quotes, we knew the first day we got out there when we saw Dylan's boots what had happened. Cooley said, for us, this is a win. We have fought so hard for charges. On Friday, prosecutors announced charges of aggravated murder and abuse or desecration of a dead body against 59-year-old James Brenner, who was previously named as a suspect and is already in custody on unrelated charges, the gun ones. In quotes, this is good news, Cooley told KSL TV on Saturday. In quotes, we don't have a conviction and we don't have Dylan's body, but we won the first battle. Okay. Is a conviction different to a murder charge? Is a conviction like actually being sent down? I'm just trying to understand that. And as well, just briefly, whilst Dylan has not been found yet, what happens to Brenner? When does he get sentenced to prison? Has that already happened? How long is his sentence, if that's the case? And what about that the gun charges, which was pushed back to, was it March or April? Does that just keep getting pushed back? Or will that finally happen because Ben has already been charged with Dylan's murder? Let me know if you know, okay? Court documents state that during the search for Rounds, a pair of boots were located, one with a bloodstain. Analysis found DNA belonging to Rounds and Brenner on them. Phone data also showed Rounds' movements on the day he vanished, including his visit to a remote property where Brenner was squatting, the grain shed. The last signal from the phone was at Lucin Pond, where search located it. Investigators performed a forensic download of the phone and found a time-lapse video showing timestamp taken. Video showed defendant Brenner blood stains on his arms and shirt as he's cleaning a gun. The shirt which defendant is wearing in the video was analysed and the victim's DNA was found on the shirt. Documents state defendant was interviewed and made several claims, corroborated forensic evidence, in addition to making numerous demonstrably false statements. Yeah, we've seen that before. We've seen that a few times. Cooley described the evidence as solid, in quotes. If a jury doesn't convict him, I will be absolutely shocked, she expressed. Do you feel that Brenner will be convicted or not? Let me know your thoughts. Dylan was originally from eastern Idaho but spent the last 3 years off and on living in Lucin. Authorities said Brenner was squatting in a trailer and was Dylan's closest neighbour. Cooley pushed back at descriptions that Brenner was a family friend, saying that that was not the case. Interesting. That is interesting. Now, I can't remember from the top of my head. I've seen it worded like this in the past, that Brenner was a family friend of the Cooleys. Okay? But do any of you remember Candice Cooley ever saying or relating to Brenner as a family friend? Did she ever say that in the past? Let me know in the chat, in the comment section, okay, because it's important. I mean, if it was the case that she did say it at some point, because, who else came up with that statement to begin with? I'm not quite sure. But if it was Candice Cooley, I can understand why she would push back that claim now. You don't want to be associating yourself with a criminal with a bad history who's also impacted your family. You get what I'm saying? You don't want to be seen as vulnerable or be seen as in a negative way because you allowed this person into your life, you brought this person into your home, not literally, and then it led to the downfall. Maybe. I'm not quite sure then. Cooley said she's confident that her family and volunteers will find her son's body. Okay, so either family or volunteers. No word of LE. Interesting. So Candice Cooley is basically saying it's either her, the family, or volunteers like the K9, Equisearch, but not the official LE or FBI. That's interesting. That is interesting. I know Candice Cooley doesn't look up to the LE, Box Elder County Sheriff's Office, in a positive light due to how things have been handled with time, though Candice Cooley has previously kept more quiet trying to work with the LE in recent time, and yet she still feels more confident that just volunteers are more capable. In quotes, when the weather breaks and we can get out there, and if some sort of deal has been cut and we're still facing trial, we will spend that whole summer out there finding our son, and we will find him, she said. Brenner was previously ordered to be held in the US custody unit, US custody until his trial on firearm charges. At that same time, Friday's court records included a summons to Box Elder County Jail for booking. Okay, held in custody until his trial on the firearm charges. As we know, the firearm charges have been delayed. So what I'm asking you is, because Brenner has been charged with the murder of Dylan Rounds, aggravated murder, first degree, third degree, as well as desecration to a corpse, will that then lead to the next court date for the gun charges actually happening on that day, and they'll be no longer delayed because of what's happened right now? What's your thoughts on that? Let me know. Interesting what Candice Cooley said, where she said, and if some sort of deal has been cut and we're still facing trial. Basically what Candice Cooley means there is, whether it be by her, the family, or more to do with the authorities, LE, if they're able to strike a deal with the devil, also known as Brenner, get maybe a confession, a location of where Dylan's at, then they can go back out there and search and try and bring Dylan home. So even Candice Cooley is acknowledging it, that a deal may have to be made. What deal would that be? A lesser sentence? The ability to not be sentenced to death, the death penalty, to avoid that? Maybe. But it all depends what state of mind, frame of mind Brenner is in. If he feels he's got nothing left to lose, then he might be most reckless and manipulative. I just hope that during this process with this whole making a deal, that the likes of Brookie doesn't pop in and say, oh, I struck a deal with Brenner, because that will just get very messy and cause more disruption. But as said, I think for most part of it, most of the humans have faded out with time, right? The disruption reduced slightly. Is that it for this article then? Yeah, okay. Let's just briefly go back. Well, let's just go onto the maps now and just kind of summarize. Right, here we are. As you can see with the maps, we've got no key markers because it's not really possible at this moment in time. Burial site 1, potential burial site 2, that stuff. But what we can question is this video which depicted Brenner cleaning the gun. Where did that take place? Where was Brenner at the time of that video? Was it back at his trailer? Down here? near to the grain shed? Was Brenner sat down on a chair, on a stool, on a bench? Where was the phone actually placed? Was it on the side, propped up? You know, it would have had to been propped up or at an angle to be able to record Brenner and have him in shot. Because if you have the phone facing down, well, the video quality will be black because most likely it's the rear end camera. And if that's facing downwards, it's obscured, right? Obstructed. If you have the camera literally face down screen and the camera pointing up, it'll only be of the sky. So it has to be at an angle. And that's what I don't quite understand. Why purposely put a phone at an angle when you put it down? You know what I'm saying? Normally, if you just putting your phone down, you casually place it down, flat down. Maybe some people do it the reverse way. But you don't say, right, I'm going to put my phone down, wedge it here, bounce it against a book or my bottle, put it into the tripod. No. You only do that when maybe you want the camera facing you because you're about to record a video. You get what I'm saying? And as well, when it comes to like propping up a phone, there's more chances of being successful in just literally putting it down than trying to have it angled without it slipping, falling. So there's that to question. And it's like, where did the video take place? Was it on site here or was it elsewhere? Was Brenner cleaning his gun near to the grain shed or was it further afar? That's what I'm not quite sure of. As for where Dylan was actually buried, I don't know personally, because Candice Cooley in the past talked about the wash, whichever one that was, because it was never disclosed. Maybe that's the location where Dylan was buried originally. I said I don't know which wash, but let's just use this one as an example. We've got a wash here, as you can see. If for whatever reason, somewhere down here Dylan was buried, maybe that's where the LE went, checked, investigated, found nothing, but did soil samples and realised that DNA of Dylan was once here, but no longer, hence desecration. And it's like, if that was the case, I'm not saying that it is, but if that was the case, such as the location, where would Brenner have gone next to dispose of Dylan? North, east, south, west? Closer or further afar? That's the biggest question. That's what's most difficult to try and understand. What we also need to try and learn, and I don't know if it's possible, is how did the LE catch wind, catch sight of being able to find Dylan's original burial spot? If it was done fairly straightforward and they didn't have to rely too much on evidence or Brenner himself, then there's a possibility that maybe they could strike lucky a second time round and actually find Dylan. You know what I'm saying? What I also feel is with Brenner handing those guns to Don originally, right, post Dylan's disappearance, maybe shifting the blame onto Don, Brenner trying to save himself, but Don catching on to that and not wanting to be a part of it. I feel that when Candice Cooley, maybe like a month ago now, on Doug's interview, No Thanks, the live stream, when Candice Cooley said about how Brenner tried calling Don Hately. I don't know at that time whether Don Hately was living here or if he already left by then and moved on elsewhere. But it was a failed call, and Don supposedly tried dialing back but did it incorrectly, and there was no follow-up after that. But I feel that maybe at that point, whilst Brenner was no longer a walking free man, maybe that call was made to get Don Hately to move Dylan Round's remains for a third time, possibly. You get what I'm saying? Because why else would you call Don? Why else would you call your friend? For one more favour? You know, you've already handed the guns over to Don, handed on more responsibilities and burdens onto him. What next? Oh, could you please move the body I disposed of recently, Don? Maybe. I feel Don may have probably not have followed through with it, You get what I'm saying? But I think Brenner would have been dumb and cheeky enough to expect for someone to do his dirty work. Because, like, Brenner did it the first time round, right? Hence why the Ellie have not recovered Dylan Round's remains. And then after that, because Brenner was then arrested and taken in, he couldn't do anything else. So maybe he wanted someone else to do the dirty work. But the question is, why do you have to keep moving the body from place to place? Normally, most of the time, when you dispose of someone, you dispose of them for good, whether they're found or not. But to be constantly moving them about like it's some kind of treasure hunt, it does no good for anyone. Like, you've got the constant stress and things over your shoulders, if you're the one responsible. But then also, you just got people going on a wild goose chase, constantly going around in circles. Dodgy. Yeah. And then we're tying on with the mountain talk. Preferably, where are the majority of mountains? Well, they tend to be on the border, as you see here, like the spine that goes all the way down, with Bald Eagle Mountain, Governor's Spring just nearby, which is down here. This is one of the hot spots, which has been mentioned by Lance Kelly, more so, but also Ty Corbin. This is where they feel that Dylan could be at. Now, at first, it would have been like in the past, yeah, possibility, you never know. But then with evidence coming out with time and it was being worded as it all took place at the grain shed, it all went down here on that day. It finned, what do you call it, finned? No. It loosened that grasp, that idea, that concept that Dylan's here. But then just recently, with the confirmation that desecration took place, removing the body, placing it elsewhere, concealing it once again, then you never know. It opens up that questioning, that possibility that maybe he was taken here, because it is further away from the grain shed, right? You turn around, over that way, it's further away. It's a bit, in a way, outside of the box, because I don't think the same amount of search, time and focus has been put somewhere like here in the mountains as compared to Dylan's farm or the grain shed, right? I know like volunteers, searchers, Ty Corbin, Lance may have gone here to the mountains, whichever side, maybe more so on the Montello side, but they can only do so much, right? What it has also opened up for questioning, and we need to highlight it now, this could be for good and bad reasons, and you'll know what I mean, is you remember the bag of bones situation? Well, it's reopened up that questioning because of desecration. Okay, Dylan has been moved, but some people believe that maybe Dylan was burnt or chopped up. That was the case and scattered about. That could be one of the reasons to maybe June 2nd spring cleaning, rubbish being taken out, evidence, Dylan himself in little pieces. That's what serial killers have done in the past. It's been known. You may have seen it as well. But what it could also mean is, well, the other question of where were they taken? To a dump, landfill, or scattered about? Is that why when Lance and Ty Corbin was driving along Bald Eagle Mountain, one of the dirt roads, they stumbled across that bag of bones? Is that a possibility? And that's what people were actually hinting at. And that's what Lance Kelly even suggested, that maybe that could be the case. Maybe that bag of bones is to do with the idea that Brenner did chop up Dylan and spread him out. Do I, Warlight Ref, agree with that personally? No. I still feel Dylan was simply moved elsewhere, and that's it. Okay? And as for the bag in bones, or the bones in the bag, it's a tongue twister, that. The way I see that is, well, they did respond back, the authorities, the police, and said to Lance that this bone, that bone, and that bone was of animal remains. But Lance did say there was the odd bone that wasn't explained or talked about by the police or the sheriff, deputy, whoever. So, I mean, you could say, well, there was an unknown bone in a bag of animal bones. Bit mysterious, maybe. maybe not. I mean, how else could you interpret it? Unless Brenner, and I don't think that's the case because quite a few people seem to think that Brenner is not smart. The only other way of looking at it would be Brenner chopped up Dylan, put the bones, the remains, in different bags, but mixed them up with animal bones as well to avoid detection. But that seems very far-fetched. And considering the other stuff, such as the Dylan Brown's phone recording, and Brenner disposing of some evidence but returning others, such as the guns supposedly, that type of behaviour, it conflicts with being smart and thinking things through. And in a case like this, it just seems like if you're dumb, you're dumb. If you're smart, you're smart. You're either one or the other. And most people seem to agree that Brenner is the first. I mean, if for whatever reason Brenner did go to somewhere like here to dispose of Dylan, most definitely a car was used, a vehicle. Was it Dylan's own pickup truck or was it Brenner's own vehicle? I'm not quite sure of, can't confirm. But it's got to be in an area where it's not much of a tourist spot or high traffic area. I mean, I know it's quiet, but if you got hikers, you got campers, you got people with dogs, you may not want to be burying someone on a designated path. I just want to highlight that. Do you know this area? Why is it so clear? Do you know, like when you look at the rest of the mountain area, why is this one spot look like really realistic and 3D? That's so weird. It's like the one bit that actually looks really clear and realistic compared to everything else. Weird. I mean, there's a bit of white stuff. What's that white stuff there? Is that snow? It must be. But it's weird how you get these like little blobs and splotches. But then again, you got a few more, yeah, like there as well. Remnants and on top as well. So I guess the trend, the pattern, the ideas of where Dylan could be at high probability areas still remains and maybe strengthened with the recent news coming through. Of course, you can leave your thoughts and opinions to what you think, if you agree or not, if you believe there's any new locations that open up to questioning or not, okay? As referring back to Joseph's comment earlier, which I forgot to do, when he was highlighting about Kurt Wadsworth bleaching his trailer. I mean, you know, coincidence with that occurring with Dylan's disappearance, with supposedly Kurt being one of the last few to see Dylan, because supposedly Dylan was in the presence of Kurt on a Friday, 27th of May 2022, before leaving to go back to his farm. From how it's been worded by other people, it might have been Taylina, but then again, could be biased, that, because, you know, an actual Wadsworth defending a Wadsworth, kind of biased in a way, but at the same time, you should listen to them because they will know better than anyone else what that person does, their behaviour, their patterns, how they do things. Describing Kurt as like wanting to be clean and sterile and just get rid of germs and stuff, right? But still, could be covering for someone. You always got to be careful with that. But it was just worded in the past, from what I could remember, that Kurt was known for bleaching his trailer. It wasn't a one-off. He's done it in the past. If that really is the case, then it's not that suspicious. But it's a bit of a coincidence. Bleaching it, after Dylan left? Dylan's disappearance? Cleaning it to get rid of evidence? Or just cleaning it because that's a daily or a weekly or monthly routine thing? One or the other. Leave your thoughts to what you think, okay? But I think we probably can return back to the maps some other time, maybe with key markers and points to look in deeper. There's only so much we can look and talk about at this moment in time, but I'm sure more may come out. Will we get more periods of silentness? Maybe, but I'm sure there'll be burst. And I don't know if it's worth acknowledging, but in a way, I don't know for definite, but do you know, like when I said there'll be at least one more twist or turn in the case? I think I predicted it. So yeah, what I mean basically is I said there was going to be like a twist, an unexpected moment that would happen sometime down the line in the Dylan Rounds case. And previous, the odd little thing happened, the odd little thing happened. And I kept saying, no, this is not it, this is not it, it'll be a bit later. And then what we've heard recently. But what truly is the shock twist in this case, though? That Brenna's been charged? No, because that's more of an expectation. Though, the fact that Dylan was moved elsewhere, the possibility that LE allowed that to happen because they delayed stuff, the evidence coming through that on Round's phone there is video footage of Brenna, which incriminates him, but is also a bit of an unusual piece of evidence because it's where did that come from? How did that even begin? Who was recording it or who begun the recording? That's in question as well. So I'd say technically I have predicted this big twist in the case. But the condition is, technically Dylan was going to be found, but because things were delayed and because early on Brenna had the opportunity to move things about, it was unsuccessful, the recovery of Dylan. So that is a twist in itself, I would say. Is it safe to say that there'll be more twists and turns in the case? Possibly, yeah. I don't know if it's to the same scale. You know what I'm saying? I think this was probably one of the biggest ones, the biggest twist and turns in the case. But I think there might be some smaller scale ones with time, right? Do I feel like any new names will come out? Part of me feels like no, not now, not at this point. But maybe a past previous name such as Don may come into the mix if we're tying it in with what Joseph has said recently with his opinion that maybe Don could be somehow working or cooperating with the police in some way, hence why he moved away as well to get away from it, so he's not a target. Maybe Don might play a part down the line in some way, but I think it's just more about progression at the moment. Not too many obstacles or roadblocks, just more of kind of like a waiting game in a sense, both with weather and maybe also with Brenna talking. The only other prediction what I'd give is, I just feel like Brenna, if under the condition that he feels like he's got nothing left to lose, he's probably not likely to reveal the location of Dylan. But that does not mean it's the end of the world, right? Like, this is what I'm going to acknowledge. And I might have said it at the start, but I'll say it once again. With this recent news coming out about Brenna being charged, all the focus is on that. All the focus is on about the phone and the footage. All the focus is on the type of charges. It's like, oh, and obviously the other one, and even Jazz Gerson highlighted it, that Dylan has not been found yet, that Dylan may never be found. And it's like, whoa, 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 calm down, shh, under control. You know, maybe because, I don't know, but when I looked into it, I just thought positive, positive, positive. And I'm not a positive person. I'm the complete opposite. And yet I was able to acknowledge this was a positive and that was a positive. That is interesting. That's different. Very different. Very. Because like when I was reading through it, when I understood it, because take in mind, the video what I did last night, I was doing it all on the spot. Reading it for the first time ever. Having to process and understand it on the spot, right? Okay, I've done it maybe times in the past, so I've got a bit of experience, but still there was a lot to take in, right? And it's understandable if you don't take everything into mind, such as like the iCloud, like what Indiana had highlighted, and maybe the backhoe, but then again, that backhoe wasn't talked about in those official news articles, so can't really be done for that. But you get what I'm saying. But like when I was reading through it, I was like, okay, they found the original spot of Dylan. That's a positive, because technically they would have found Dylan and retrieved him if it wasn't for Brenna having the opportunity in the past to remove, right? So there is that. Obviously it can be countered with a negative. Oh, Ellie, responsible for that, responsible for Brenna having the opportunity to move stuff about. Yeah, but it's not 100% confirmed because we don't exactly know exactly when there was the desecration, right? So that's still in question, right? The bit about the phone footage, I thought, well, it is shocking, but it's a positive because not only does it incriminate Brenna, but it highlights the little mystery of who's responsible for starting that video record. And maybe there's a little hint or clue within that video that might suggest where Dylan is now at, or maybe that's what hinted at where Dylan was at the time of what Brenna was going to do, right? And just overall, like, I might be wrong, but I'm just under the impression that they found that first burial site without Brenna confessing. That's a positive. That you were able to hit the nail on the head, technically speaking, without the help of Brenna. So if you was able to do it the first time, somehow, then can't that be done again? Maybe. So if Brenna doesn't confess, maybe Don might know something, or maybe Don could assist down the line. I mean, is it a big twist? Well, if I'm tying it in with the prediction of a small twist and turn in the case as well as a returning face or name, I could tie it in as a rough prediction that down the line that maybe Don Haley might step on in, and if he does, he might be able to assist in the possible location to where Dylan is now at. Providing that Don was in contact with Brenna up until the arrest of Brenna truly, then maybe Brenna had a few final words to say to Don. And if I'm tying it in as well with the possibility that that phone call, the failed one, made in jail, Webber County Jail in custody, by Brenna reaching out to Don, maybe that was a cry for help to say, Don, can you remove that body, the second burial spot, which I told you about, could you move it now elsewhere? If that was the case. But unfortunately, Don did not answer the call at the time to actually hear what Brenna had to say. But if that's what Brenna had in his mind, that was Brenna's motive for calling Don, then basically Don would have already knew of where Dylan was at. But you could say, well, why has Don not reached out yet then? That is a thing. Unless Don is half working, assisting as a witness, but also not, or reluctant. You know, it's rough predictions, and they're rough for a reason, okay? So I think, well, no, we don't leave it there because we've got something else to look at. Unfinished business, okay? So make sure you're still here. Do not go running away yet, okay? Basically, in recent time, the admin, second in command of the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page, an individual who is in direct contact with Candice Cooley, known as Jazz Girlson, reached out to my channel recently with a request. You would have seen Jazz, J-A-Z, Girlson, pop up in a few of my videos when we looked at the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page, as you will remember. I'll share with you her comment made recently. I assume it's the real Jazz Girlson. You can never be too sure. But we'll read it out and see what she's got to say. Okay, you ready for that? Let's begin. Right, so here we are. Here's the highlighted comment, and I believe this was on one of my previous community posts in the community tab section of my channel. Can't remember which one it is, but let's just read what Jazz Girlson has to say. Hello. I wanted to first of all say thank you for continuing to cover the disappearance of Dylan Rounds. It is so important to keep his case active and find answers. You may know I work closely with the family on social media and admin the Facebook group. I'm writing to you at the request of some of the members in our group. They would prefer if you could black out their names in your videos, if at all possible, with a question mark. That's interesting, for sure. Right, so you saw that. Obviously, you can share your own opinions and ideas behind that. I mean, I can understand some humans might interpret it as being censored, silenced. Others will just simply see it as a simple request out of respect for people's privacy, due to the fact that this case has led to people being attacked negatively, called out and stuff, and supposedly the Cooley, the Rounds family have experienced it themselves firsthand. So I get that. From my knowledge, well, first of all, I appreciate what Jazz Girlson said. She acknowledged my channel, which is a positive. Now, in response to about blurring or blacking out names, from my knowledge, with the technology I have and editing tools, with just about all of them I've used, including the current ones, editing software, there doesn't seem to be a feature which can black out or blur out names, right? In the YouTube Studio section, you can blur out a portion, but you can't have more than one blurred option, I think. Does that make sense? Do you know, like, if you did a video and then someone's face appeared in it, or if you had a child and you didn't want their identity to be revealed, so you put a big blurry blotch spot over the face. But I don't think you can add a second one. You can only have one. And if you think about it, if you're scrolling through and you put these blurry patches on, you're limited to how many you can add on, so other people's names will still be revealed, or profile pictures. So you can't really do much with it. And as well, even if it did, what it does lack is the tracking ability. Does that make sense? If you add a blurry patch, it does not track in terms of motion. It's in a fixed position. So if I start scrolling up, that blurriness doesn't go down with it. It remains fixed. So that name that was behind it, when the screen's turned up, the name will appear above it. So it just doesn't work. The only question I have, I guess, towards Jazz Girlson is that if these members don't want their usernames, profile pictures being shown public, then why are they associating joining in on a community page which is public, which anyone can access and anyone can see? If I didn't do any videos on those comments, on those usernames, still, people could still go on that, you know, community page and look at them themselves. So, you know, if you don't want identities revealed, then they shouldn't be made public in the first place. Does that make sense to you? Kind of like with public information, kind of like in the past, when it came to Brookie, I'm not saying that it was her, but it seemed a bit coincidental. When Brookie technically was exposed for being a fraud, a liar, or in some sense of that, I received a privacy complaint on one of several videos of mine. They weren't successful. They didn't go through. They were rejected, those privacy complaints, because I didn't go against YouTube TOS, because the information provided and shown in the videos were of public information. It didn't go against anything. It was public information, right? Simple as. So technically, the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page, whether it be a comment, a message, a response, a post, if it's public, it's public. So it's not really going against anything. Though I can understand if the page or if a person's profile was made private, yet you had access to it somehow, and then you shared it public, then yes, it's not good. But that is not the case. It's a public page, publicly viewable, anyone can see it. Just let me know if anyone has been negatively harmed because of coverage of the page. But I think it's inevitable. Even aside from the coverage of my videos, Candice Cooley has been attacked regardless. Other people have been attacked regardless. Some channels have actually spearheaded, like it's a witch hunt. I have not. I just simply maintain balance. That is all. Okay? So yeah, just that little request, just interesting, right? Because of yet another key individual watching along. Because as I said, you never know who's in the background. You never know who's watching right now. Good people, bad people, dodgy people, neutral people. You never know. Anything can happen. So of course, leave your thoughts down below to what you think about that request. But as well, more importantly, about this video as a whole. Did you learn anything new? Did anything else make more sense this time round than the last? Any of the points made by Lance Kelly, or about the gun situation, or about the gun being returned in the past? Does any of that link relevant to now, the news, what we've heard of? Let me know your thoughts down below. I think we'll leave it there for now. We'll see what happens next and what there is to cover next. So thanks for watching. Goodbye and good night for now.